The Spider-Man Far From Home hot toy figure giveaway continues. All you have to do is enter is like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications for the channel, and tell me down below which member of the Sinister Six you're most excited to see. In recent weeks, Spider-Man No Way Home has released an abundance of promotional material seemingly to account for the stagnant months leading up to the release of the first trailer. While avid fans were clamoring to get a glimpse into the movie during Marvel's silent period, it's safe to say that their hunger has been satiated by the oversaturation of trailers, promos, and TV spots centered around our favorite returning villains. The film opens up the extensive web of multiversal connections and is welcoming in aspects of previously established Marvel movie franchises. And though this has left fans ecstatic for the release of the film, it's also left us with several questions. One of the primary concerns is how Doctor Strange states that in each respective universe from which a villain is pulled, they allegedly die fighting their own iteration of Spider-Man. If it is to be believed that these are the exact same interpretations of previous characters from the Raimi and Webb franchises, then the deaths of characters like the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus are understandable. These character deaths marked some of the most iconic scenes from the Raimi trilogy, but not every villain on the current roster of the Sinister Five seems to have met their end at the climactic crescendo to their conflict with Spider-Man of their respective timeline. The two premier figures we are talking about are of course the Lizard from the first Amazing Spider-Man entry and Sandman from the third Raimi film, as the Sandman nor the Lizard actually died in their movies. So why did Doctor Strange do this, and what are we missing? Stick with us today, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, and let's discuss some of the possibilities for what may have happened in their universes that could explain Doctor Strange's claim that they are all meant to die in some way, again fighting Spider-Man. But again, this is under the belief that these characters are not variants and are in fact the same iterations of the beloved characters that we've already seen in their different timelines and universes. Let's begin with the Lizard, who we last saw being cured by Peter Parker and seemingly beginning his path to redemption at the end of the first Amazing Spider-Man film. Upon the death of Captain Stacy and Peter's success in reversing the effects of the Lizard's toxin, Kurt Connors saved Peter and seemingly is on track to redeeming himself later down the line. This poses an interesting scenario, seeing as the antidote that Peter used was seemingly designed to rid Connors of the Lizard once and for all, mitigating his chances of ever transforming into the Beast again, which leaves us to wonder how he is still in the Lizard form in No Way Home promotional material, and a few popular fan theories have risen to prominence. The first theory proposes that he is actually pulled from much earlier in the film before the final conflict takes place. This would mean that the timeline is currently in flux and the Lizard's ending is uncertain, seeing as the multiverse is now open and there are a number of possible directions for Connor's story to take. Doctor Strange may very well have seen a scenario wherein the Lizard dies, and while this may or may not occur, the fact still remains that he must be returned to his home timeline in order to preserve the stability of his reality, and the main MCU reality as we know it. It's important to note that this theory also applies to Sandman, but more on that in a moment. Another theory proposes that the Lizard is set to revert back to his old ways, and that now one of two scenarios is set to take place. The first is that since he has now tasted this power and the benefits that he can reap as the Lizard, it's only a matter of time before he relapses once again. Connor's goal at the end of the movie was to aid in human evolution, giving humanity the edge by transforming them into creatures very similar to himself. Connors very clearly sees a distinct benefit in living in the Lizard state, and he may be tempted to turn back at some point in time, feeding his addiction if his willpower fails to restrain him. The second possibility is that if he sees a feasible advancement to make with this experiment, it could lead him to reinventing the experiment that transformed him to begin with. Only in this case, he would actively be seeking to improve upon it. Connors is a brilliant scientist who may very well seek to find the flaws in his previous experiment in order to do it better, and to reap the benefits of regenerative abilities without the pitfalls that he experienced in the Amazing Spider-Man film. If he finds a method that he believes can repair his arm without the dire transformation that it entailed last time, he may fall back into his old ways of inadvertently awakening the Lizard yet again, despite not meaning to. If this draws him into conflict with Spider-Man yet again, then the ending of this story that takes place after The Amazing Spider-Man 2 could result in his eventual demise at the hand of Spider-Man, or at least when engaging Spider-Man. And this could be what Doctor Strange is referencing, with the Lizard pulled after the events of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This would also explain the design alterations, as this Lizard may not be the exact same iteration as the first Amazing Spider-Man film, but rather the second iteration. but might be an enhanced version who transformed as the product was slightly different that experimented on later down the line, and the product that Curt Connors developed was slightly different. The second candidate and member of the five is Flint Marko's Sandman, is a bit harder to pin down, as he seems to be firmly on the path of redemption at the end of Spider-Man 3, transitioning into something of an anti-hero. One of the most heartfelt scenes of the Raimi trilogy was when Marko sought Peter's forgiveness, which he was ultimately granted. In this universe, Peter and Marko seem to be on relatively cordial terms at the very least. They are not in conflict any longer, and it seems as if Peter and Flint have no incentive to fight one another. So then how could Sandman be destined to die at the hands of this Spider-Man? One possibility is that Sandman actually doesn't die fighting against his own Spider-Man, but alongside him. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker has almost 2 decades of experiences beyond the events of Spider-Man 3. And we know that when Sam Raimi and the Spider-Man franchise was still in its prime, there were plans to introduce a myriad of new villains, from Mysterio to the Vulture to Kraven, and eventually the Sinister Six. Though Spider-Man 4 was ultimately discarded, that does not necessarily mean that the events are not canonical. If Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker has a long tenure of adventures as Spider-Man, then he may seek an ally in Flint Marko at some point throughout his career as a superhero. He has already sought an ally in Harry Osborn, who had previously fought against him, and one of the premier staples of the Raimi franchise is the depth of their villains. Otto Octavius, Harry Osborn, and Flint Marko have all had redemption arcs, and 2 of them had heartfelt self-sacrifices to close their stories, sending Marko off in a heroic manner where he sacrifices himself in order to save Peter at some point after the events of Spider-Man 3 could be a fitting end to the character that finally seals his reaffirmation as a hero, leaving his life of crime behind once and for all. While reverting back to a life of crime seems unlikely for the newly reformed Marko, it's important to note that he seems to have taken a villainous role in No Way Home, which leaves us to wonder if he too is being pulled from much earlier in the film, as we mentioned before with the Lizard. This would mean that his future could likewise also be in flux, and his future may be uncertain, much like with the Lizard. While returning him in the midst of Spider-Man 3 would likely entail some sort of memory wipe to explain why he seems to have no recollection of his multiversal adventures, this is yet to be seen. Another possibility is perhaps the most outlandish, but it is a fan theory that has gained enough traction to warrant mention here. It's interesting to note that Sandman has yet to be seen in his human form, and there is no confirmation that Thomas Hayden Church will be reprising his role as of yet. This has led some to believe that this is not in fact Sandman at all, but might actually be Mysterio casting another illusion of an elemental, much like he did throughout the course of Far From Home. Given his affinity for creating images of various elemental monsters and creatures, it is not unreasonable to believe that this may be his doing, and this just might be misdirection from Marvel Studios that fans have been led to believe is Flint Marko and Sandman. Given this multiversal concept, there has been no confirmation that this is actually Sandman, and the fans have theoretically jumped to the obvious conclusion and been swept up in the hype, which was further exacerbated by Marvel Studios' marketing team. We have already detailed the numerous ways in which Mysterio could have feasibly survived without breaking character or story continuity, so his survival would not be unreasonable. But for a full breakdown of this, be sure to see our video on how Mysterio survived and why he's the 6th member of the Sinister Six. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of these theories? Do you think that they are plausible endings for their stories? And how much do you think that they will be revealed in No Way Home? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching the channel. I hope to see you in the next one, and have a great day.